looked at me and I couldn't believe that an angel had come just to sit here with me. And I tried and I tried, but I just couldn't read. Your silence never sounded sweeter.
Hello, welcome back to my channel, and welcome if you're new here. My name is Ashley, this is Ashley Faith. Somehow my channel has turned into a Twilight channel. I'm not sure how that happened. Actually, I am sure how that happened. It was a huge part of my childhood. Since lockdown happened and Stephanie made her announcement, it's found a resurgence into my life. I've talked about this a lot on my channel, but we cannot consume art and consume media without seriously critiquing the impact that it has had. Whilst Twilight did a lot for the YA genre, it did carry with it some harmful stereotypes and harmful stuff that I think as a fandom, as fans, and as people who have read the books, we must understand the downfalls and the problems with things that we consume, because nothing is free from problem and nothing is free from impact. I have a list because I didn't want to miss anything out. Some of these things that I mention vary on severity and vary on prevalence in the story. So a few things are problems, yes, and I'm not going to downplay the problems that they are, but they're not as prominent to the story. So I think I'm going to start with like my biggest problem and then work down. And disclaimer, this isn't to say that you can't like Twilight or that you can't consume Twilight media, whether that be the actual books, fan fiction, the movies, whatever. This isn't to say that you can't do that, but what I'm imploring you to do with bringing this discussion point forward is that you actually sort of critically analyze the media that you consume, whether that be Twilight or anything else, and listen to the people who say that it's affecting them. The first thing is racism. Now, this is something that is prevalent in the criticism of the series in the mainstream, and my next point also is something that's prevalent in the criticism in the mainstream. So the thing with racism, I sort of have like 4 points under this. So the first one that I would like to mention, which is the most obvious if you just look at the series as a whole, is the treatment of the Quillette tribe. Now, Stephanie Meyer, from what I've gathered, did not ask permission from those tribe members to use their stories or to use them in her story. And this is an important factor because Native American peoples, Native American tribes in America, are really heavily impacted by a lot of systemic racism. The fact that she didn't talk to them at all and none of the profits of her book actually went to impact that community. She just appropriated that tribe and put onto them whichever supernatural elements she wanted, and she cast them as the werewolves or the shapeshifters in her story without actually thinking about the impact that that would have on the tribe in the future. Now, some would argue that the Twilight series has impacted the tribe in a beneficial way because they get a lot of tourists, namely Twilight tourists, visiting and, you know, spending money on their reservation and spending money in their shops and businesses. However, it's pros and cons. I don't think that will outweigh any of the cons. And one of the cons that I had that was brought to my attention whilst just looking online, just, you know, being online, is that the way that the wolves are referred to as dogs by the Cullens, by other vampires, is problematic because there's an underlying stereotype of Native American people being savages, and this is a stereotype that is sort of prevalent in society, and Stephanie Meyer just leaned straight into the stereotype and used it, and it's problematic because these sorts of stereotypes actively impact, still to this day, Native American people. And then along with that is the treatment of her people of colour characters, the characters of colour in her story. The only non-white protagonist, main character, who I wouldn't really call Jacob a protagonist, but the only non-white main character in the storyline has so much shit thrown at him. He goes through so much character assassination, especially in Eclipse and in Breaking Dawn, that it almost feels racist. And then you also have the treatment of Leah, similarly, who she gets portrayed as a villain, when in fact she's not the villain in the situation that she's in. She is a victim of the situation with this stupid imprinting. We need to be aware of that when we're consuming the media, and this is why a lot of fans have decided that Stephanie has no rights to the canon and that we will fix the problems for these characters. But Stephanie is the writer. She still profits off the series and off what we say and do online and in person, so you have to be aware. I do want to give you sort of a balanced argument on that, and whilst there are problems in the representation that Stephanie did, I have spoken to some people online who are Native American, and they said that that was the first time they saw themselves portrayed at all in sort of YA, and whilst they say it has problems, that it was the first of its time and they appreciate that for what it was. When you talk about these problems, especially the racism, don't just talk to one person, talk to a variety of people, because people have different opinions. And some people will say that you should not read Twilight ever again, you should not buy anything ever again, where some people might say if you're going to buy it, then maybe you should consider offsetting some of that by donating to the Quileute tribe. That it's not all bad. The series isn't all bad, and you shouldn't feel guilty for liking it. But what you need to do is you need to accept the flaws and you need to understand the impact of the series. The second point is Jasper, Hale, the former Confederate soldier. She could have just said that he fought for the Union. That would have solved the whole problem. Why did he have to be a Confederate soldier? And here's the thing, if he was a Confederate soldier and the book sort of showed us his character growth, that would be a different story. Yes, his past would be a harmful past or whatever, but the fact that he doesn't, well, not stated in the books or any of the surrounding literature, he's not stated to have had a growth period where he realizes what he did was really fucking bad. We don't get that from him, from his story, and so we have to assume that, is he still racist? This sort of picked up something else, whereas all of these Cullens, these are white people from at least 100 years ago, like maybe 80 years ago. What about their internal biases? If we just take Edward, who was born in 1901, surely he would have some racial biases if they sort of actually talked about it at all. And there's two other minor points, is that Stephanie, why? And then there's another slight point, is the fact that when you become a vampire, you become really pale, and it's not really touched on what happens if you have a darker complexion. Now, assuming you go like a paler tone of what you were, but what would that look like, and why don't we have examples of that in the book? So the second main point of the criticism is the unhealthy relationships that Bella finds herself in, and the fact that these aren't really challenged during the course of the series. So Edward, for one, is very controlling and very, I want to say they have a very codependent relationship. They spend all of their time together, and Bella doesn't hardly spend time with anybody else apart from that one scene in Eclipse where she goes to Angela's house and she writes on the graduation announcements or whatever it is. I don't understand that, I'm from the UK. That's one of the problems. And then in Eclipse you see just how controlling Edward is on the grounds of safety when it comes to the werewolf, and he doesn't allow Bella any agency. While she does sort of grapple against him on this, there's no sort of like messaging in the storyline that what Edward did was wrong. It's sort of almost justified because the werewolves are dangerous, and again this plays into the stereotype of the Native American people not being trustworthy, which is a problem. Oh, now on to Jacob. So along with Jacob's character assassination, he forces himself onto Bella into a non-consensual kiss, which that is definitely challenged, so I'll give Stephanie that. Bella punches him and Edward is like, why did you kiss her without permission? One thing about that scene is, though, Charlie for like a hot second is like, oh, Jake, good on you, and it's like, Charlie? Really? Stephanie, why did you have to put that line in there? Why did you have to put that line in there? The main problem with Jacob and his character assassination is the fact that he manipulates Bella into kissing him on the eve of the battle. If you don't kiss me, if you don't tell me that you love me and kiss me like you love me, I'm going to kill myself. Now that is one major huge red flag. It's like a red flag the size of the flag that Gavroche flies in One Day More. It is a huge red flag, and if somebody is saying things like that to you in your relationship or in any relationship that you have, cut them out of your life. So I did touch a little bit earlier, but the fact of Bella and Edward's relationship is very, very, very codependent, and you see the impact of this when Edward leaves and just how upset Bella gets. And I think that's something that we need to talk about, that you don't have to spend every second with your partner for it to be a committed relationship, and that's something that I don't think Bella or Edward quite understands. Okay, so now we're on to the more minor points. The first sort of medium, like the medium level point, is the imprinting. Now, imprinting causes lots of different problems. It causes this sort of question as, do these people that get imprinted on, the imprintee, or whatever you want to call them, do they get a choice in it? And if they don't get a choice in this relationship, and to a certain extent the wolf who does the imprinting, is that a problem for consent? And it's a difficult question that I can't just, answer for you right now, but it's something to think about, that whether that is a problem with the imprinting. But the major problem with the imprinting is the fact that you can imprint on children. It's very clear in the setup that you see Quill with his imprintee, Claire, who is 2 years old, to set up Jacob's imprinting on Renesmee. And I think it's just very strange, and it echoes of grooming in a sort of similar vein as if your parent's friend, who you've known your entire life, then ends up being in a relationship with you later on, who's seen you grow up as a child. It's just very, very pedophilic, to put it bluntly. And that is one of the major problems that I personally have with the series, is that why? Just why, Stephanie? And in that case, would Renesmee have a choice? Could she say no to Jacob? Because I just feel that it's very strange that Renesmee will sort of grow up knowing that Jacob is going to be who she wants to be with when she's older, and also the fact that Jacob was obsessed with her mum for a good few years. Like, Stephanie, I don't know why you had to do that. And I've been discussing online how I find the Breaking Dawn plot to be really annoying and really pointless and really gross, and I would much rather have had a book where they go around the world meeting Carlisle's vampire friends, maybe meeting some new ones along the way, and maybe convincing a few of them to go vegetarian. That would have been a better story, in my opinion, than Renesmee. Now, I like Renesmee as a character. I think she's really cool. I think her power's really cool. But did she need to exist like that? The answer is no. So, the two more minor points that I want to mention is the heavy, heavy, heavy pro-life messaging. Now, I know that Stephanie is a Mormon, but the pro-life messaging in this series, in Breaking Dawn, is so heavy, it almost like smacks you in the face. Because it's very interesting, because Bella has never ever once thought about having children or doing that. Like, she literally says to Rosalie there's nothing she's going to want more than Edward, which is clearly wrong, because apparently she wanted a baby so badly she was willing to die for it. this sort of causes problems, sort of impacting on the mindset of young women and young people who can get pregnant, you know, transgender men, non-binary people. It's problematic because you don't have to carry a pregnancy if that's going to affect your life chances, if that pregnancy is going to kill you. And the staunchness of Rosalie's position on that, whilst I do understand because of her background, I do think it's kind of problematic because it really echoes the conversation that's had surrounding abortion, instead of the conversation and a debate being sort of center focused, where their two sides are talking, or even slightly leaning towards the pro-choice, which is, I think, the only morally right stance. And I think pro-choice doesn't mean that you yourself would get an abortion. It's the belief that everyone has the right to make their own choice on that matter. And the way that the debate is sort of set up in the book is that Rosalie and Bella are in the right, obviously, because it's Bella's story, and whether Bella wants to keep the baby or not isn't in of itself isn't the problem. The problem is that the debate that is sort of set up between particularly Alice and Rosalie during the scene where somebody says the pregnancy isn't good for Bella, and then Alice says the fetus isn't good for Bella, and then Rosalie says, say what it is, Alice, it's a baby, it's just a little baby. And it heavily sort of favors Rosalie's side of the argument, which I think is just inherently a problem. And whether you yourself agree with abortion for your own choice, I think it's really, really important that people understand that it's not your choice what other people do with their body. And the last, more minor point is, I have friends who suffer from OCD, and I know that it's problematic to go around saying that you are a little bit OCD because you like things to be neat and tidy. Now, I can link you to a channel that talks about OCD. I'll put it right up here. And the reason why that's problematic is because being OCD isn't liking things to be neat and tidy or hating to have dirty hands. OCD is a crippling mental health condition, and the flippancy that OCD is sort of used in the story is a problem, and I haven't actually heard anybody talking about it. I found it particularly prevalent in the first book, in Life and Death. I can't tell you specifically, but I did find it sort of in various different books, and particularly in Life and Death, because Stephanie actually says that Beau is more OCD than Bella, which just isn't true. Like, maybe Beau just likes things a bit tidier than Bella, but he isn't more OCD than her. So that's the last little critique that I have of the series. If you think I've missed anything out, do let me know, put them in the comments, but please be respectful. I hope that if there's something that I mentioned that you never thought about before, then you take a little bit of time to think about that more and how you think that will impact your enjoyment of the series in the future. And I'm not saying that you can't enjoy it, because I love the series and I love what it means to my life, but I can't say that I like it and say that I enjoy it without realizing and accepting and critiquing the flaws that it has. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked it, please give me a like or a dislike if you didn't. Doesn't really matter, the engagement level is the same. And subscribe if you want more Twilight content. I am doing a series, Countdown to Midnight Sun, with a few other of my normal videos sort of thrown in there. I have a few more reading vlogs coming up. Short Second Life of Britannia and the excerpts that are on the website are some of the things that I'll be tackling next. And the last thing that is to say is thanks for being faithful, and thanks for watching. Mwah.